welcome to both, and let us perhaps begin by giving you both the floor for a few moments to reflect broadly about where we are and where we're headed, and then perhaps we're going to dive into a few more specific points. Minister Albares, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for accepting to moderate this table, and once again to my dear friend Ayman Safadi for accompanying us today. And thank you for coming to share your insight on the Middle East, the key role of Jordan, that once again I want to highlight it, how ponderate, how collective you always play, and how on behalf of peace, coexistence, good neighborhood, you are always advocating. You have a very good assessment on the situation in Gaza, Palestine, and the whole region, and I really appreciate always your word, your advice, and the cooperation that we do together. For the last 3 decades, peace efforts between Israel and Palestine have been based on the hope of negotiations about peace agreement. And unfortunately, we have seen that they have always reeled because of terrorism, because of extremism. For long, we have thought that if leaders of both parties could talk to each other, the conflict could be managed and we could prevent further escalation. We are in a completely new setting since October the 7th. We have 40,000 civilian Palestinians killed. The estimate is that 150,000 are wounded. There are 2 million of internally displaced people that wake up every morning not knowing if at the end of the day they will be alive, and certainly seeing no future. So my main message in this introductory remark is we cannot keep managing this conflict. We really have to address the root causes and to offer a solution, to offer a proposal of future for the Palestinian people and also for the Israeli people that we take, of course, into consideration. We are strong advocates of the two-state solution. That's why we have recognized Palestine, but that's why we take into consideration the legitimate security guarantees that Israel is asking for. And in order to make this jump from just managing, this is just a new crisis, we'll manage it and we'll wait a few years until the next one. The first thing we have to do and to jump to a solution is we need an essential condition, is the ceasefire. This is, I would say, a prerequisite. This is not the last objective, but is the previous stage. An immediate and permanent ceasefire that must allow the massive entry of humanitarian aid and the release of all hostages. We need the opening of all access for humanitarian aid. And we need to uphold, and for those that are doing it, to stop fighting UNRWA. UNRWA is an essential and vital partner for the survival of 6 million Palestinians that are in many places, not only in Gaza, they are also in Jordan, that it has been always a great host. Last time I went to Amman, I was able to visit a school of UNRWA. The second thing that must change is the notion of security and how you achieve security. Israelis, Palestinians, in the Middle East, we must all help them to understand that security exclusively based on force is not a lasting security. It will not bring security. One of the reasons why Spain has recognized the State of Palestine is because we think that the legitimate right of Israel to security comes also from having a Palestinian state next to them living in good coexistence and neighborhood, and assuring mutual security and mutual prosperity. And our Arab partners, Ayman knows more than me on this, but every time I talk to them, they tell me that they are willing to offer Israel all the necessary security guarantees. We see that the solution comes from this Palestinian state living in good coexistence with Israel, and Israel normalizing the relationship with all the Arab states. In the recent clash between Iran and Israel, this was contained partly because of coordinated regional action that involved countries, Arab countries of the region. This is a proof that this can work. And of course, we really believe that the future of the Palestinian people is in the hands of the Palestinian Authority. Once peace goes back, Gaza and the West Bank, and of course, the illegal settlement must stop. That's why Spain has imposed sanctions on violent Israeli settlers. Gaza and the West Bank must be put under one single Palestinian Authority. And we are supporters of the Prime Minister Mustafa's ambitious reform program. That's why we have tripled our development aid to the Palestinian Authority, and we have added 16 extra million euros to provide them with the sufficient financial base. Because, of course, if we don't give the means to the Palestinian Authority to succeed, it will not be possible. And that's why the upholding of the tax revenue by the Israeli government must stop. And I want to commend the tremendous leadership that the Palestinian Authority is showing in the West Bank, because in spite of all the difficulties that they are facing, they are keeping the Palestinian people in the West Bank in a peaceful way. And that shows that they are able to run their own country if they are given the possibility. And that's one of the reasons why we have recognized the sovereign state of Palestine. And the last point, we have to uphold international law, and we must recall that international law, United Nations resolution, the rulings of the ICJ are binding for everyone, including Israel. There are already rulings saying that the military operation in Gaza must stop. And that's also binding for Israel. And we are very worried. We are very worried, and the news in the last few days make us even more worried about the situation in Lebanon. This is a humanitarian catastrophe for the Palestinian people in Gaza that must stop. This is not the best way, and we say it as a friendly country towards Israel, to guarantee the security of Israel and the risk of spreading the violence to the rest of the region. We see it already in the West Bank. We see this very extremely tense situation in Lebanon, and we will do as much as we can to prevent violence from going to the whole region. So basically, we think that we have to go for the immediate ceasefire. We have to support the Palestinian Authority to make sure that they will be in good shape to run not only the West Bank but Gaza the day peace comes back. And everyone, and we must help our friends in Israel and in Palestine to understand that the use of force will never bring them security. It will be momentary security that will lead in a few years to more war.
Thank you very much, Minister Albares. Mr. Safadi.
Thank you so much. Good morning to you all, and let me start by expressing my gratitude for my dear friend Minister Albares for allowing me this opportunity, and for the International University of Menéndez Pelayo for having me here again. And I say again because I was here almost 27 years ago and addressed a similar gathering, and the topic was the same. The Arab-Israeli conflict. Unfortunately, the only thing that has changed is that it has become way much worse since then. And the reason is that Israel has reneged on every commitment it has made to implement agreements it had reached, including the Oslo Accord, which should have led to the establishment of a Palestinian state that would have lived in peace and security with Israel. We're facing today a terrible moment in the history of the region. Israel is continuing with an aggression that has thus far killed almost 40,000 people in Gaza, killed almost 600 people in the West Bank, acting out of an ideology that simply wants to cancel out the Palestinian people, deny them their rights. And this is something Israel is saying, and it is doing. It is saying, if we listen to pronouncements made by the Israeli Prime Minister, members of his cabinet, they say that they will never allow the Palestinian people to have their rights, particularly their right to freedom and self-determination. If we look at action on the ground, there is another war happening. In addition to the war on Gaza, there's a war on the West Bank, a war on the right of Palestinian people to statehood, and a war on the right of the whole region to live in peace and security. Number of settlers in 1993, when Oslo was signed, was 200,000. Today, we have 700,000 settlers on the occupied West Bank. 2024, this year, has witnessed the largest land grab of Palestinian territory in over 30 years. So what we're facing here is a systematic policy that is rendering the two-state solution unviable, and therefore that is denying the whole region, including Israel, the right to live in peace and security. Because the simple fact is that there are 5 million people living under Israeli occupation today. Those people want to exercise their right to self-determination, like any other people on earth. Israel is denying them that right. That is why we have a conflict. And back to my dear friend, Minister Al-Baris' point, we have to address the root cause of conflict, which is the fact that Israel continues to occupy Palestinian territory. It continues to undermine all prospects for peace and is acting in defiance of every tenet of international law. Our priorities right now is to end this massacre of Palestinians in Gaza. 40,000 people have been killed. Some of them, the majority of them by Israeli bombs, but a lot, mainly children, have died because of starvation, because of dehydration, because Israel has been using starvation as a weapon. And these are facts. Look at the number of aid trucks that have been allowed into Gaza. Does not meet the minimum requirement of what the Palestinian people need, according to UN statistics. These are UN organizations that are stating what are the needs of the Palestinian people. They stated that Gaza will need 800 trucks a day. Less than 40 trucks is entering from Karam Abu Salim crossing a day now, and about 40 trucks are entering every other day from Jordan. But even trucks that are entering Gaza are not being distributed because UN organizations have been targeted and continue to be targeted by Israeli occupation forces. So our priority for now, ending the aggression, ending the humanitarian catastrophe that this aggression is causing, and then deal once and for all with this conflict by ensuring that we act to implement the two-state solution. The whole world agrees that the two-state solution is the only answer. Israeli government is undermining that two-state solution. So where should the world stand? Do we allow the most radical government in the history of Israel to veto the right of the region to live in peace and security? Or should the world act in accordance with its principles, with international law, and impose the peace? In the past, Israel used to claim there is no Arab partner for peace, even though there has been a partner for peace. The Arab Peace Initiative goes back to the year 2002. Madrid hosted the International Peace Conference, even longer than that, 1991. where all the Arabs came and said, we are willing and ready to engage in meaningful negotiations that would result in the implementation of the two-state solution so that a Palestinian state emerges to live in peace and security with Israel. In 2002, the Arab Peace Initiative spoke of full security guarantees to Israel, full normal ties in return for ending the occupation that has been the main root of conflict in the region since 1967. These are the facts. Unfortunately, international law is being implemented selectively. What applies in one part of the world doesn't seem to apply in another part of the world, and it seems that international law is being applied in accordance with the balance of power. Israel has done all it has done because it has been acting with impunity. If we look at facts again, the largest number of journalists killed in any conflict in recent history is in Gaza. The largest number of humanitarian workers killed anywhere in recent history is in Gaza. Of the 40,000 people killed in Gaza, 70% are women and children. Over 17,000 kids in Gaza are now left unaccompanied because their parents have either been killed or still are buried under the rubble. 86% of Gaza population has been forced to evacuate once and twice and 3 times over. 70% of Gaza's health infrastructure has been destroyed. So this is the ugly reality that unfortunately the world sees and doing very little to change. Not the whole world, though. Some countries have stood on the right of justice, on the side of international law. Spain has taken a leading position in speaking and acting in accordance with international law, acting for peace, acting for security and stability for everybody in the region. And for that, we not only thank you, but we value and recognize the important role you've been playing and the important message you sent when you stood on the side of justice, on the side of international law, and recognized the Palestinian state. I want to conclude, because I know we'll have an open discussion, by saying we have no more time to waste. This war has gone on for far too long. It has claimed far too many lives. It has made a mockery of international law. It is jeopardizing the security of the whole region, including that of Israel. Israel has suffered a strategic defeat in this war. It has become a pariah state. This is the reality with which we have to contend at this point. The only way out is stop the war, stop the killing, and start a plan to implement the two-state solution so that both Palestinians, Israelis, and everybody else in the region would live in peace. When Jordan speaks, we speak with the credibility of a peacemaker. We've had a peace treaty with Israel for almost 30 years. We know that the region needs peace, that the region deserves peace. But we also know that in order for peace to be lasting, it has to be just and it has to be accepted by the people. And the people will not accept a peace that does not guarantee the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people to freedom and statehood. What we want is a peace that will end the occupation on the basis of the two-state solution so that Palestinians and Israelis and everybody else in the region live in peace. And again, to the point that my dear friend has made, the whole Arab world since 2002, reiterated again since the war in Gaza by an initiative by a number of Arab countries, which we said, we are all ready to work together to guarantee, to create a mechanism that will guarantee the security of Israel, that will ensure that we move on a path towards full peace where Israel will have normal ties, full acceptance in the region, again, if Israel ends its occupation and allows for the Palestinians to live in freedom, in dignity, in their own state, on their own land. To do that, we need our partners in the international community to speak and speak loud and act. And that is why, again, I want to close by recognizing the very, very important role that Spain and my dear friend, Minister Albares, have made in the past, not just in the past few months, but have really reasserted in the past few months when they, again, spoke on the side of international justice, acted on the side of international law and continue to work to try and bring an end to this madness and make sure that all of us in the region live in peace and dignity. And my friend, I can assure you, as much as we know we have a partner in Spain, you have a partner in Jordan in our joint pursuit to bring about a just and lasting peace to the region. Jordan and Spain have always had excellent strategic relationship. We've worked together as partners. We want the same thing. We want justice, we want peace, we want international law to apply so that we can all come together and further work on making sure that our one region, because Europe and the Middle East are one region, one neighborhood, live in peace and security and meets the needs of our people for better lives and for a better future. So I thank you again, my friend. We value your friendship, we value your partnership. We recognize your very, very important role. And again, I want to thank the university for this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to both. And let me perhaps begin this discussion in a sense with the hardest question of all, I think, because both of you, in fact, Minister Safadi, you were kind of, sort of mentioning, 27 years ago you were here. I mean, there's this terrible feeling of sort of Groundhog Day, right? And yet it's not quite Groundhog Day because every time we wake up to the new day, it's a worse day than the previous one. And Minister Albares, you were talking about, we have to go beyond the management of the conflict. Well, the truth is we haven't even managed it, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this, sort of vicious cycle of a Groundhog Day that gets worse day after day and year after year. You both mentioned the dire humanitarian situation. And I think the hardest question, and I wanted to start back with you, Minister Safadi, is, we have this discussion about, this dreadful humanitarian situation gets worse every day, and then we somehow make a mental switch and talk about what a future could look like. And yet, what is happening now, what has happened, is having and will have implications on that future. So if you could just reflect a little bit about what is, how is it that what has been happening at the moment, the 40,000 deaths, which is, frankly speaking, probably widely underestimated, right? And the fact that there isn't actually an immediate end in sight, how is that actually going to affect the kind of pathways to the future that we can imagine?
Thank you so much. As I said, Israel has suffered a strategic defeat in this war. Because what Israel did is undermine 30 years of work to normalize the idea of peace with Israel. The amount of hatred, dehumanization that we see emerging as a result of this aggression is beyond description. People wake up in our region every day to the images of children buried under the rubble, mothers dying from dehydration, soldiers shooting with impunity at innocent people, including at UNRWA, including at other UN organizations. So unless we have something transformative, I think the terrible, horrific consequences of this aggression will haunt us for years to come. And what I mean by transformative is that short-term solutions are not going to work. Unfortunately, all we see now, the focus is just to manage the situation, and the focus is on the day after. What is the day after? How could we even speak of a day after when we don't know how it will look? There are fundamental questions that need to be asked in regards to the day after. How will Gaza look? Already 70% of Gaza, if not more, have been destroyed. A whole generation have not gone to school for a year. And their schools have either been destroyed or have turned into shelters, which are being bombed as well. So people have lost hope, they have lost faith. So how do we speak of a day after unless we put together on the table a comprehensive solution that will address the root cause of the conflict and mitigate against this happening again in 2 and 3 years, as you said. All we see put on the table right now is tactical approaches that are saying, okay, once the war stops, and the war has not stopped, and Israel is not stopping. I mean, you've got Security Council resolutions, you've got ICJ provisional measures, you've got the whole world saying end this aggression because it's madness, because it will produce nothing but more death, hatred, and destruction. But once the war ends, and it will have to end at this point, what is the message that the world will send to over 2.3 million people in Gaza who have lost everything? Is it that we're going to send someone just to manage this misery for you? Or are we going to put you on a track towards a future? And that's why our position has always been is that if 40,000 people killed, if a whole community destroyed, is not enough to convince the world that tactical solutions do not work anymore, that we cannot be imprisoned by the space that Netanyahu is willing to give. Because that's what seems to be the approach right now. We cannot continue to act in accordance with what Israel is dictating by force in violation of international law. So we need a plan that will tell the Palestinian people that you have a future of independence and statehood and freedom. If we put that on the table, so any approach to Gaza and the day after will have to stand on political security slash security leg, humanitarian, and reconstruction. Because anybody who goes to Gaza now, if the message is we are here just to manage this misery to which your community has been reduced, they'll be seen as the enemy. But if the international community goes there and says this is a plan that will guarantee that you'll have a right to live in peace and dignity and freedom just like any other people, and this is the way to implement it, and these are the resources behind it, then we have a shot. And again, let me just refer to the West Bank. It's not just Gaza that is being attacked. Over 600 Palestinians have been killed on the West Bank. Even before October 7, the number of Palestinians killed on the West Bank was the largest in over a decade. The number of settlements, confiscation of land, and the political messaging from a government in which serving ministers describe Palestinians as human animals, in which the Deputy Speaker of Knesset calls for burning the whole of Gaza, in which other ministers, the Ben-Gvirs and Smotrich of this radical government, speaks of Palestinians as having no rights. Is this the kind of action and policies that will bring about peace, or is this the kind of hate speech that will just make the situation worse? So again, our proposition, we want an end to this conflict. We start by ending this aggression. We start by making sure that Gazans do not starve. We start by stopping all illegal Israeli measures on the West Bank that is undermining all prospects for peace. And then we put a plan on the table that will impose peace. Why should Netanyahu and his radical ministers have a veto on the right of the whole region, including Israel, to live in peace and security? Why do we allow an ideology of hate that does not recognize the humanity of Palestinians to impose itself on the region? Where is international law? Why is it that what is not accepted in Ukraine is accepted in Palestine? And one of the collateral casualties of this war is the credibility of international law, which there is evidence to prove has been applied selectively. And I'm sorry to say it, even the credibility of many of our partners in Europe and the West, where our people are simply asking, why is it that this is condemnable in Ukraine and it's allowed when it comes to the Palestinian people? Is Palestinian people lives less valuable than the lives of others? These are questions that are being asked day in, day out in our region. And again, the only way forward, the only way out, is to accept that the root cause of conflict is the fact that there is an occupation that denies Palestinians their rights, their freedom, and even more, it denies them their humanity. This is not a recipe for peace. This is a recipe for more conflict. And if it's not the two-state solution, it is a one-state reality. And I It will not be a solution, because it will be an ugly reality of apartheid, and that will be, again, a recipe for further conflict.
Thank you. Minister Alvarez, we'll come back to this credibility question, so let's bracket it out for a moment. But sticking to the humanitarian side to the story. Now, in this war, the European Union hasn't exactly taken a particularly strong position, of course, because of our divisions and all the rest of it. However, it has and continues to, and this, of course, is not the only war in which it has happened, prided itself on its humanitarian role. However, in this particular war, there are at least two dimensions which have been, I think, particularly problematic as far as the EU's role is concerned. And precisely because of Spain's leadership role, I really wanted you to comment on both. The first is one that you actually yourself mentioned, i.e. UNRWA, which has been one of the dimensions of the divisions within the European Union. And so perhaps if you could comment a little bit about how those divisions are perhaps being addressed and reduced. Precisely because, as you say, there is no alternative to UNRWA as far as the humanitarian situation is concerned. The second is really this question of providing humanitarian assistance through sea routes rather than land routes. And of course, because of geography, there has been an EU, particularly Cypriot, right, side of this story, which on the one hand, of course, was and potentially good news. I mean, you know, the more humanitarian assistance, the better. On the other hand, it has been potentially part of the problem because it's an implicit recognition that perhaps assistance through sea could have been an alternative to assistance through land. And as we have seen, of course, it is not an alternative. So perhaps if you could, in saying whatever you want to say about the humanitarian dimension, also address these two, I think, very problematic aspects as far as the EU's role is concerned.
We have been very strong advocate together with another Spaniard, Josep Borrell, the High Representative, for European Union to have a strong stance. You know that one of the main risks that the European Union is facing today is the accusation of double standards. We say things in Ukraine that we don't dare to say in the Middle East. It's not the case of Spain. As I was saying in my introductory words, whether it's kids with white people and blue eyes or our kids with darker skin and dark eyes, we take exactly the same principles, the United Nations principle, to bomb civilian population, whether it's in the Middle East or in Ukraine. It's illegal. It goes against international humanitarian law. You cannot bomb hospitals. You cannot bomb places of prayer, United Nations headquarters. It doesn't matter if you do that in Ukraine or if you do that in Gaza. But we must not lose the perspective. It's true that in Ukraine, the European consensus is much easier than in the Middle East, but we have agreed in very important things. The most important thing we have agreed in supporting the two-state solution. We have agreed in the peace conference that Spain put in the table many months ago in the October European Council. It was President Sanchez that took it to the table on the ceasefire, on the release of hostages. So what's more lacking is when we have to take the decision, if we agree on that, what we do to try to implement it. That's where we can divide more on that. The humanitarian assistance is the most, with the release of hostages, the most accurate, if you want, issue right now, because it's a matter of pure humanity at the end. There is no possibility that we can try to help this humanitarian catastrophe if the land crossing borders, the points through which humanitarian assistance was entering by land are open. It is not possible. Our Jordanian friends, and we participated in that very bravely, did the airdropping. But at the end, it's not possible to give this. And this is something very important to address the situation of those more than 2 million people, children, old people, sick people that don't have the most basic needs. And I want to recall, I say it, but also the ICJ said that not allowing humanitarian aid to enter to people in need is illegal. In the previous ruling of the ICJ, one of the things they say is that humanitarian assistance must go in. And the participation of Spain in the case of South Africa in ICJ is based on many points, but one of them is this, is consciously impeding that humanitarian assistance gets to suffering population. UNRWA, it's the same story, but even more dangerous for me, because it's trying to prevent people from having their basic needs covered. I want to recall that UNRWA, basically what they do is they give food aid of emergency to people. Basically eating every day depends for millions of Palestinians on UNRWA, and providing education. So it's the most basic needs and prepare them to have a future. But UNRWA is also a United Nations body, and I want to recall that there is no oldest problem at the table of the Security Council and the United Nations than the Palestine problem, the Palestine issue. The first peace mission ever in the history of the United Nations was precisely about Palestine, and we continue there more than 70 years ago. So for me, challenging UNRWA is depriving the Palestinian people not only from their rights as people, but from their own humanity. What they want, they don't want them to eat, they don't want them to go to school, and it's also going against United Nations. And there is where the European Union voice should be heard. If European Union doesn't uphold and back United Nations, international law, ICJ ruling, who in the world credibly is going to do it? So there is a lot of stake for the international system right now on how we behave, what we say and how we act in Gaza, and also at the eyes, of course, of our Arab friends, but also what's called today the global South, how they see us. And when I say we have to go from management to solution, what I mean is, of course, ceasefire is a prerequisite, but if we focus only on ceasefire, that's how we have been dealing for the last decade with this. Let's bring immediate peace, but let's don't do anything else. So we are preparing the next burst of violence for both Palestinian and Israel. I insist, I keep insisting, of course we think of Israel. The Spanish people has nothing against the Israeli people, but we think also that the Palestinians have a right to a state. That's why we have recognized the State of Palestine and a future, because they cannot be condemned eternally to be a refugee people. Why they should be eternally a refugee people? Secondly, because we don't see an issue to this endless war and how to guarantee the security for Israelis and Palestinians, the two-state solution, and at the end, given the situation that we see in Gaza and more in the West Bank, out of pure humanity for the Palestinian people.
Now, let me turn to not so much the here and now, but indeed the near and perhaps medium-term future. So far, the debate has often revolved around this famous day after. And over the course of the months, the idea of this day after was a day after a ceasefire agreement. And of course, we know that negotiations over a ceasefire have been led by the United States, by Qatar, by Egypt, and this has been going on for 10 months, right? Now, what if there isn't a day after? So what if there is not a moment in which the war is officially ended and in which brave new things can come about? What if we are in a trajectory, which I think is the one that we're in which perhaps we will see a reduced level of violence and perhaps more violence erupting elsewhere, and in which there isn't going to be a clear-cut moment in which, we are going to face towards a brave new world. I'm wondering, in that scenario, which at the moment seems to me to be the most likely, what is it that Jordan and the Middle East, the region, can do, and what is it that Europe can do to shift that trajectory towards one in which we can indeed start talking, and more than talking, acting, towards the kind of future that you've been both describing, the two states and all the rest of it?
Thank you. If I may, before I address that, just a couple of quick comments on the humanitarian situation. There is a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and simply because Israel is not just not allowing aid in, it is also not allowing the UN to be able to distribute aid to those in terrible need for it in Gaza. Supplies from Rafah crossing have stopped simply because Israel occupied the crossing and occupied the Philadelphia corridor, and there's a major problem there. The UN is only being able to get, as I said, 40 trucks a day, if even so. From Jordan, we can go up to at least 500 trucks per day. But we're not being able to do that because of obstacles that Israel is putting in the way of that, and because of other logistical issues that are the creation of Israel. Right now, we're sending about 40 trucks every other day. We can go up to 500, but for that, we need Israel to allow that. We need security guarantees because our convoys were attacked by radical settlers, and we need the UN to be able to receive the aid from Eretz and distribute the aid in Gaza. None of that is happening. Other logistical issues, and His Majesty hosted a conference in Jordan in coordination with the UN in joint effort with the UN and Egypt, and we outlined the needs for us to be able to bring humanitarian aid up to scale in Gaza. And one of the major issues that the agencies on the ground cited is the fact that inspections by Israel, lack of sufficiency of deconfliction, which means UN workers are being attacked and they don't feel secure. And of course, now we had a total collapse of law and order in Gaza because there was something called the Blue Police, Palestinian police that used to accompany the trucks. Israel shot at them, and now it prevents them from accompanying the trucks, so nobody is there to guarantee the security of Gaza. So in Jordan, we can immediately scale up to 500 trucks per day if Israel allows that to happen and if the UN is enabled to work. And as my dear friend mentioned, we started the aerial drops of aid months ago. We knew, and His Majesty said it, this will be a drop in the ocean. But we had no other recourse. So we were dropping supplies by aircraft in partnership with countries like Spain, and we knew that was not enough. But we knew that every piece of bread mattered. It could save a life. And that's why we did that. But to answer your question, the only way that we can sufficiently address the humanitarian crisis is, number one, of course, for the war to stop. And by the way, people have not yet seen the amount of destruction in Gaza because Israel is still refusing to allow international press into Gaza. Let them allow international press into Gaza and show the world what's really happening there. And number two, all land crossings have to open. With all due respect to whoever advocated for that, the sea route is not sufficient. We've seen it tried, and we've seen that it did not move the needle in any meaningful way. So we have to open all crossings. UNRWA has lost 200 of its staff members in the war in Gaza, more than any other number of humanitarian workers in one conflict anywhere in the world. But UNRWA, according to Israel, is a terrorist organization because this Israeli government is labeling anybody who speaks against their war crimes in Gaza with all the negative adjectives that you could come up with, including terrorism. UNRWA, 260,000 kids used to go to UNRWA schools in Gaza. Now they're not going to school. UNRWA helps Palestinians in its 5 areas of operation. 5.6 million Palestinians are registered with UNRWA. UNRWA provides emergency supplies, education, health services, But more importantly, UNRWA provides hope that the international community is still committed to finding a just solution to the plight of refugees, which by international law have a right to return and compensation. So that is why Israel has been systematically targeting UNRWA even before October 7. And I said it before and I say it now, UNRWA has been the target of political assassination by Israel even before October 7 because it wants to kill the right of refugees and it wants to bury this issue. On the issue of ceasefire, we all support the ceasefire. We demand a ceasefire. We need a ceasefire because without a ceasefire, it means more Palestinian innocent people are being killed and more of Gaza's infrastructure is being destroyed. And we do support the negotiations to bring about an exchange deal that are being conducted by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. But again, every time negotiators are close to a deal, Netanyahu comes out and changes the parameters. So that is why we're still not being able to get a deal, mainly because, again, Netanyahu keeps changing parameters. Now, for the day after, what is the day after again? How does the day after going to look like? Is it a day after where Israel is going to continue the siege of Gaza? It's going to continue to partially or fully occupy Gaza? Is it a day after in which Israel will continue to conduct operations and target Palestinians in Gaza? All these are variables that are practically important to be able to speak of a day after. And again, is the day after a day isolated from what comes next? That will be another catastrophe. Is the day after looking at Gaza as a separate entity from the occupied Palestinian territory, the West Bank and in East Jerusalem? That is catastrophe. The day after that we foresee in Jordan, in the Arab world, and I think many of our friends and allies do too, is a day after in which we launch a plan to once and for all bring about a lasting solution to the conflict on the basis of the two-state solution. And I did not use the word process consciously because we don't want another process. We've seen what processes have done. In 30 years of process, Israel made the prospect for peace even more evasive than it was. So we cannot speak of a process, we speak of a plan. We in the Arab world have said what we wanted, have clearly articulated a plan that built on the Arab Peace Initiative 2002. 6 Arab countries have shared a proposal, an initiative with the United States, with our partners in Europe, and our plan is simple: live and let live. That two-state solution, whereby a Palestinian state emerges on June 4, 1967 lines, with occupied Jerusalem as capital, that lives in peace and security with Israel. And in that plan, inherently and clearly, is a comprehensive commitment by all of us to make sure that we collectively guarantee the security of Israel within the context of a plan. So day after has to be part and parcel of a comprehensive plan that will bring about just and lasting peace on the basis of the two-state solution in accordance with international law and with a clear timeline to implement it and clear commitments by all. So that is what we in the Arab world are putting on the table. Show me what any Israeli official has put anything on the table. Israel only tells you what it does not want. It never says what it wants. What do they want? If they don't want the two-state solution, what do they want? What their behavior is saying, what their action is saying, is that they want to continue to occupy the Palestinian territory. They want to continue to violate Palestinians' rights. And Netanyahu was able to sell to a majority of Israelis and some in the world that Israel can parachute over the Palestinian issue and has peace in the region. I think, sadly, tragically, Gaza has shown that this is a fallacy, that the only path to peace is one that guarantees the rights of the Palestinian people to freedom and statehood, and also addresses the legitimate security concerns of Israel. And this is our proposition. We're balanced. We know that Palestinians have to live in peace and dignity and with their rights fulfilled, and Israel needs to live with security and acceptance. And that is what we're putting on the table. But Israel is not putting anything on the table other than threats, more destruction, more confiscation of land, more settlement, more defiance of international law. And again, it is committing so many war crimes in Gaza, so many war crimes in the West Bank, simply because it feels it can do that with impunity. And the Security Council has failed to act in accordance with its mandate. The international community, we have all failed to hold Israel accountable for what it does. Show me any other country that defies Security Council, General Assembly, International Court of Justice, and still gets the support. And what we're saying is that supporting this war, supporting this aggression, supporting this Israeli government is not supporting Israel, is not supporting the future of Israel. The future of Israel, if it is to be a future of peace for everybody, which is what we want, it has to be one that recognizes that the Palestinians have rights and they must be fulfilled. Other than that, we're going to be in this cycle of violence every year in and out. And now you see what's happening with the threat of regional escalation in Lebanon, and that is a dangerous escalation, and we obviously stand firm against opening another war in Lebanon. We do not need more tension. The international law has to be respected. Resolution 1701 has to be abided by all, and the sovereignty and security of Lebanon cannot be another victim of this vicious cycle of violence and war.
We're running out of time, but I did want to squeeze perhaps one question in. Let me see if there's anyone. Yeah, over there.
Hello, good morning. I'm Eduard Soler from the Autonomous University of Barcelona and also Associate Researcher at CIDOP. So far, and thank you to the Minister and the Vice Prime Minister for making very clear what we're trying to do. And this is in line with what I wanted to ask. So far, we haven't been very successful in persuading Israel that this is not the way to go. And I'm not referring only to war, but also, as you were saying, to the grassroots, to the occupation. What else can we try? Is there something we've tried and it kind of worked somehow, so that this is the way we should try to follow? Or is there something else that we have not tried yet that may give some results in persuading Israel, the Israeli political class, the Israeli public, that this is not the way to go? What else can we do also to bring others, sometimes even more powerful voices, next to our view within the EU, within the international community? Is there something else we can try to do? Thanks.
And I'm not going to take it, I know we don't have any time left, so I'm going to actually add to Eduard's question there and go back to both of you for your final remarks. So, Minister Albares, based on Eduard's question, but also on Minister Safadi's remarks, is maybe something that we haven't tried, going from a process to a plan, right? And is that something that perhaps Spain and the EU could go behind? And Minister Safadi, to you, is there also something that we haven't tried, which has to do with bringing in, beyond, of course, the current players in the region, of course, Israel, Palestinians, Europe, but is there a role that other countries in the so-called Global South could be playing? And is that something that hasn't been tried? Minister Albares.
I think that the good news, if we can say it that way, is that everyone in the international community knows what's the solution and even knows what the plan is. That's why in the last few months, when there have been votes in the Security Council and in the General Assembly, for instance, on the accession of Palestine to the United Nations, the vote has been overwhelming. That's why when Spain has put at the table the peace conference and reinforcing the idea of the two-state solution, we got consensus and it came out 27. So there are two things that we have to do. One, we are engaged in that. We are engaged with that in Jordan. Today we were talking about that. We have to try to talk more and more with one single voice in the international community. So far, Europeans and the Arab Muslim group, we are getting more or less to the same conclusions. We talk with the same words, we make the same analysis, but we do it each one on its corner. we have to start to talk together. We are already done it. They have been invited to the Foreign Affairs Council, and to start to speak with one single voice. The more we are, the more we can put a framework, the better for the others. As Eduardo was saying, they can come to us, to that framework that we put. And the second thing, I keep insisting on that, and this is more to the Israeli public opinion. Nothing that we say, nothing that we do, nothing that we want to see for the future is against Israel, is to harm Israel, is to diminish Israel. On the contrary, we take into the equation very seriously their security, which is legitimate, their desire to normalize with the region, their friendship as well. I said it, the Spanish people are friends of the Israeli people. And I think this is a very important message. We truly believe, we as Spain and everyone in the international community, that the real peace, the real stability, the real security, the real prosperity will only come when we will put into force what we know is the only solution, the two-state solution.
Minister Safadi.
Thank you. Sir, there's no shortage of ideas. There's a shortage of will. And this shortage of will is on the side of this Israeli government. As far as what needs to be done to bring about peace, I think the whole world knows it. And wiser men and women have worked on this file before all of us, and I think we know what needs to be done. The two-state solution is the only path to a just and lasting peace that will fulfill the rights of the Palestinians and guarantee the security of Israel, period. Problem is, this Israeli government does not want this two-state solution. Remember that only a few days ago, the Knesset adopted a resolution banning the establishment of the two-state solution. So they blocked it politically. Again, listen to Prime Minister Netanyahu. He speaks openly against the two-state solution. Listen to Ministers Ben-Gvir, Smotrich. They speak openly that the Palestinian people do not have rights. This is the challenge with which we're faced, and this is the point of departure that we should move on in trying to move forward to the future. Consequences have to be there. Israeli government has to face consequences. If it violates international law, it has to face consequences. When it commits war crimes, it has to face consequences. And when it prevents and denies the people of the region, including Israelis, a future of peace and security, it should face consequences. And these consequences should be in the form of sanctions, embargo on the sales of weapons to Israel, and also clear messaging to the Israeli people that this ideology of hate of the current leadership does not and will not guarantee a future of peace for Israel. So the Israeli people need to know that what this government is doing is hurting them. And that is why we need all of us in the international community to come together and act in accordance with our collective human values, with international law, with UN Charter, and say, this is wrong, and if you continue with this wrong, you'll face those consequences. And chart a path towards a peace that will, again, as my dear friend has said, will guarantee a future for both Palestinians and Israelis and all of us in the region. Because if we don't do that, if we continue to only pay lip service to the two-state solution, we've seen what has happened in the past 10 years. The two-state solution is more evasive now than it was 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, it was worse than it was 20 years ago because facts on the ground are changing. So moving forward, I think we need to speak with one voice in terms of abidance by international law. We need to speak with one voice about the two-state solution being the only path forward. We need to speak with one voice that Israel cannot continue to get away with violating international law, and it should face consequences. And we need our partners in the West, particularly, need to speak very articulately about the costs that this war and this ideology of the Israeli government is costing the Israeli people. Now, we have said, we have a plan that we put on the table that is balanced, that is consistent with international law, We're hoping our partners in the West will support it. We believe recognition now is more important than ever before, and again, we value the leading role by Spain in this regard. We need more European countries and other countries to come and recognize the Palestinian state as at least a confirmation of their belief and conviction that the two-state solution is the only way forward, and to respond to Israeli decision to block the implementation of the two-state solution. And we cannot act tactically anymore. It has to be strategic. We need that transformative move that will end this conflict by addressing its root causes. We're working very closely with Europe. We're working very closely now with Spain on next steps that we will do to at least sending those messages. We're working with the US again, within the South, within the Arab and Muslim world. We are working, but what more can we do in terms of what we're offering? Because what we believe is that what we're offering, again, is a path to a future of peace for both Palestinians and Israelis. This Israeli government does not want this path. The world should hold it accountable. And again, I close by saying this Israeli government, Netanyahu, and radical ministers, extremist ministers in his cabinet, cannot have a veto on the future of the region for peace, nor can we accept the limitations of the very, very narrow space that this government is offering. We have to create our own space of peace and say these are the parameters, and work and wholeheartedly to bring about that comprehensive peace, because other than that, again, the conflict will erupt again and again, and everybody will suffer. Palestinians will suffer, Israelis will suffer, the whole region will suffer, and all of us in the international community will suffer.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister Albares. Thank you, Minister Safadi. All I can say at this point is to hope that when Minister Safadi comes back, not in 27, but perhaps in 2 years, we're going to have not only a radically different conversation about this, but that many of the things that you've been talking about will have actually happened. Thank you very much.